Your heart rate spikes to 150, your hands shake, and someone next to you says, "Just relax." That advice has probably ruined more high-stakes moments than the pressure itself ever did. Here's what this video actually gets into. Not breathing tips you've heard 100 times, but the actual neuroscience of why some brains stay online under fire while others go completely offline, and the specific, trainable mechanism that separates the two. But before we get into how elite performers rewire this, you need to understand what's actually happening inside your skull when panic hits. Because most people are fighting the wrong enemy entirely. The popular version of staying calm goes something like this. Breathe deeply, think positive, believe in yourself. Sounds nice, doesn't work. Ask anyone who's frozen during a job interview, a big presentation, or a first date that mattered. Positive thinking didn't save them, because positive thinking isn't a neurological intervention, it's a bumper sticker. Then there's the guy who reads one article on Navy SEAL breathing and thinks he's cracked human psychology. He tries it once, under zero real pressure, feels slightly calmer, and declares himself immune to stress forever. Then real pressure shows up. A car nearly hits him, his boss corners him in a meeting, and the technique evaporates like it was never there. Why? Because he trained the tool in a vacuum, never under load. That's like practicing a golf swing only in your living room and expecting it to hold up at the US Open. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your brain isn't broken when it panics. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do. The amygdala, a small, almond-shaped cluster of neurons, detects threat and hijacks the show in under 100 milliseconds. Faster than conscious thought. That's not a bug. 10,000 years ago, the guy who stopped to rationally analyze the lion got eaten. The guy who ran first and thought later survived and had kids. So calm isn't the absence of that alarm. Calm is what happens after it. Or more precisely, calm is trained control layered on top of an alarm that never fully turns off. Sit with that for a second. Because that single distinction, alarm versus control, is the entire video. Let's get into the actual mechanics, because this is where it gets interesting. When the amygdala fires, it triggers your hypothalamus, which dumps cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream within seconds. Your heart rate jumps from a resting 70 beats per minute to 140, sometimes 180. Blood gets rerouted away from your digestive system and toward your major muscle groups. Your pupils dilate. Your peripheral vision narrows by nearly 30%. This is fight or flight, and it's not metaphorical. It's a full-body chemical takeover designed for one job: survive the next 10 seconds. But here's the part nobody explains. That same flood of chemicals also shuts down activity in your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, judgment, and rational decision-making. Functional MRI studies on stressed subjects show measurable drops in prefrontal activity during acute panic. So the smarter, calmer, more strategic version of you doesn't disappear because you're weak. It disappears because your own biology temporarily locks it out of the room. Which is why, just relax, is such useless advice. You're not telling someone to solve a hard problem. You're telling someone whose problem-solving hardware just got physically deprioritized to go ahead and solve the problem anyway. It's like telling someone to sprint faster after you've already tied their shoelaces together. So why does this matter to you? Because if panic is biological, not moral, then the fix isn't willpower. It's rewiring the biology itself, deliberately, repeatedly, under conditions that mimic the real thing. This is exactly what elite performers train. Take combat pilots preparing for ejection scenarios. They don't just read about the process. They sit in simulators that replicate the noise, the G-force, the disorientation. Because the nervous system doesn't respond to information, it responds to repetition under load. Military units use something called stress inoculation training, where recruits are deliberately exposed to controlled chaos, loud explosions, cold water, sleep deprivation, specifically so the amygdala's alarm response gets recalibrated to a higher threshold. Elite sprinters use a completely different tool, box breathing, a 4-count inhale, hold, exhale, hold pattern that directly slows heart rate and signals the vagus nerve to pull the body out of red alert. Same goal as the pilots, wildly different mechanism, which tells you there isn't one universal fix. There's a toolkit, and the tool has to match the trigger. I remember timing my own heart rate once, before a presentation that mattered. 142 beats per minute, standing backstage, mouth completely dry. What actually got me through wasn't calm. It was a 4-second exhale I'd rehearsed 200 times before that moment ever existed. And that rehearsal is the twist nobody talks about. The goal was never to eliminate the spike. The goal was to survive the spike long enough for the prefrontal cortex to come back online. Calm people under pressure aren't calmer. They're faster at recovery. Read that again, because it changes everything about how you should train for pressure. You're not trying to become a person who doesn't feel fear. You're trying to shrink the gap between the spike and the recovery. That gap, in elite performers, can be under 3 seconds. In untrained people, it can stretch past 10 minutes. And in those 10 minutes, careers, relationships, and split-second decisions get wrecked. So imagine someone starting today, with zero background in any of this. They wouldn't start by trying to feel calmer. They'd start by finding one small controlled stressor: a cold shower, a hard sprint, a public speaking slot nobody's forcing them into, and practicing the exhale and recover cycle inside that discomfort, not after it. A week later, they might notice the recovery takes 4 seconds instead of 40. A month in, they're not chasing the absence of nerves anymore. They're chasing speed of return. Athletes call this arousal regulation, and the smart ones don't try to eliminate arousal at all. They ride it. A boxer at 160 beats per minute isn't broken. A student at 160 beats per minute in an exam is often finished before the exam even starts, not because their body failed them, but because nobody ever taught them the difference between activation and collapse. This is the part that separates the people who actually perform under pressure from the people who just talk about performing under pressure. It's not talent, it's reps against discomfort, logged deliberately, long before the moment that counts. Panic isn't the opposite of confidence. It's the raw material confidence is built from, if you train it instead of running from it. Which brings up something we haven't touched yet. What happens when the stressor isn't a single spike, but something that never fully turns off? Chronic pressure behaves completely differently in the brain than the sudden kind, and it breaks people in ways a 4-second exhale can't fix. That's a different chemical story entirely, and it might be the more important one.